Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. I apologize if you can hear shoveling. My husband is shoveling because it has snowed. But I have my Book Dragon mug from Fable Grounds Coffee. And my Writer's Quadrant shirt. I love this shirt. John got it for me from Christmas. Who's pumped for Onyx Storm? I am, but that's not what this video is about. Today's video is going to be the worst books of 2024. These are not books that were necessarily released in 2024, but they're the worst books that I personally read in 2024. And this is no shade. Books are very subjective and opinion based. So if you loved these books, that's perfectly fine. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But these books just did not work for me. I tried to weed it out just by my ratings. So these are all 1 stars or 2 stars, and there's 7 of them total. And I'm sure you've heard me talk about some of them, if not all of them in reading wrap-ups, but definitely some of them. So I know this can be kind of a negative video, but I do like to talk about both sides of the reading experience, you know, like the best books I've read and the worst. Because that's what reading is about. It's about finding what works for you, and these did not work for me. And that doesn't mean these authors are horrible people or whatever. It just means that this in particular thing just didn't vibe. We didn't vibe, we didn't get along. And that's okay. And the first book is Library of the Dead. This is like the first book in the Edinburgh Nights, I think. I was really intrigued by this and really wanted to love it and ended up not really liking it at all. I was able to listen to it very quickly because it was a very short, it was like 8 hours audio. So I was able to get through it very quickly, but I just felt like I didn't care the whole time. And even when the stakes were high or they were supposed to be high or things were supposed to be scary, I just didn't have any ties to the story. I didn't have any investment. I didn't care about anything that was happening. So that wasn't great for me. It's not like one thing that I was like, this is why it was so bad, you know? It just like, I just didn't care. It was boring to me and I just didn't really like it. I do know some people do enjoy this series, and if you do, I think the next one is coming out this year. Or already did, I'm not really sure. Didn't like the pacing, I didn't like the overall flow of the story. I felt like the reveal was okay, but again, just didn't feel like I had enough stakes in the story to be connected to it. And so if I'm not going to be connected, I'm not going to read it. And I didn't like it, and I'm not going to continue. The next one is Damsel, and I had really high hopes for this actually. I thought it was going to be kind of like a hidden gem potentially. It came out a while ago, it's not new by any means, and I knew it had something to do with the secret of a dragon, a princess that was saved from a dragon, but she has no memory after that and doesn't know what's going on. The whole book was kind of, like after the beginning was kind of disturbing, and not in a edgy or interesting sort of way, but just in a gross sort of way. There was a lot of reference or just straight up talking about assault or attempted assault. And the way the magic worked in the world was also kind of based around all of that. And that was disturbing and also just not done well. So I just felt like the book was really sad and depressing, which makes sense with the content that's around. But I just felt like there wasn't anything you could necessarily root for, or didn't feel like there was any forward motion with the plot. It just kind of felt like there was a little bit of mystery that you were getting unraveled, but overall it just felt unsatisfying and almost like, why am I being put through this? It was just kind of painful and sad, and so I didn't really enjoy that one very much. I also read Merry Ever After. I believe this was by Tessa Bailey, and this was in the, I can't remember what it is, but it's like the Audible Amazon series where you could read it. You get it on Kindle or you could listen to it on Audible. They were little holiday short stories, and I thought that was really fun, so I listened to all of them. But this one in particular did not work for me. Some of them were okay, some of them just weren't my favorite. One of them was really good, but this one was just kind of, because it's a short story, I feel like it has to be done in a certain way where you're invested in the plot, invested in the outcome, and interested in the overall story. But this one just felt like it was spiced, and that was the entire plot, and I didn't have any buy-in with the characters or care about their story or care that they got together, so the whole thing just felt meh for me because I wasn't invested in the outcome. So I dislike romances that go in that route, because if I'm not invested in the characters and I don't care that they get together. And romance is kind of a take it or leave it for me. Like, I do really enjoy it in books when it's done well, But if that's the entire plot and there was no character development and there was no like getting to that point, I don't care and I don't like it. So that was this one for me. It was probably fine for some people, but I just didn't enjoy it. How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying. We know how I feel about this book because I did a whole review on it and I really, really disliked it. I was really angry. I was really frustrated at how this book was so hyped and said to be so funny and had such an interesting premise, and I just thought the execution was so poor. That's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be a funny adventure story that had a really interesting trope about the heroine dying and being reborn and being like, I'm done with this, I'm done dying as the hero and I'm gonna become the villain. And it was just so, the character was so immature, the way they wrote her was so over-sexualized. She was bi and over-sexualized, and I just felt like that was a gross misinterpretation. Literally everything had to do with that. Everything had to do with sex. Everything that lived, moved, breathed, twitched was like a sexualized, became sexualized. And that was like the whole point, the whole book, until like the end. And that was so disappointing. I was really upset about that because I was really looking forward to this. And it was one of the like top books I was looking forward to in 2024. So it was a deep crash into disappointment and I really disliked it. There was like a small part of me that thought about continuing because of the like 1% at the end that I enjoyed with character growth and interesting plot, but I'm not going to because the rest of it was just so gross and painful. So I'm not going to continue that, and I was super, super sad about that one. Next is Unbroken Bonds. This is the last book in the Bonds That Tie series, and this series kind of punked me because I picked up the first book and loved it. I loved the first book. The second book, I liked it, but it wasn't as good as the first. And then I felt like it just kept going downhill for me. And it kept going downhill because of the plot and because of how the point of the book shifted from the trauma and the secrets and the mystery and the plot points that were being established and just kind of went straight into like the romance. And that's what it focused on more. Other stuff was happening, so I'm not going to pretend like that's the only thing that was going on in the series. But from whatever changed between book 1, 2, and 3, it just went downhill and never redeemed itself for me. And I kept going thinking, okay, but I loved book 1, so it must redeem itself. And it's just kind of like middle book syndrome, and like it's 6 books, so there's a lot of middle book syndrome. And eventually it'll redeem itself and get back to this place, and it'll be resolved, and it'll be great. And I just felt like I never got that. I felt like I never had that feeling again, which was really disappointing because like I said, I really loved book 1. You do get a little bit of resolution with one of the characters that you really dislike in the beginning. Get that backstory and that resolution, so that's nice, but like, I felt like how she wrapped up the series was not satisfying for me, and I wish I'd gotten more. I wish I'd gotten more of the world. I wish I'd gotten more of what was going on. It just felt like they were in so much secret and politics for so long that there wasn't like a big blowing up. And I know we could argue that there was a big blowing up in like the battle, but I felt like there wasn't. It was like build up, build up, build up, and I was waiting for that like big final battle, and that kind of happened, but not really, and then it was just resolved and over. And it happened earlier on. So I didn't like that. I don't think people will necessarily read this book for the plot. So that's okay for a lot of people, probably. But I was not okay with that, and I didn't like that was just kind of hastily resolved, and then it was just focusing on the romance. And not even necessarily like the character development. Like there was a little bit, but just romance. And I need more. I need more in my books. So I was really disappointed at the end of this series and the series as a whole, but I do stand by that I liked book 1. So if you are curious about this series and you don't think those will be issues for you, you should go ahead and check it out. But I was really disappointed. I was hoping to end up coming back and loving the series as a whole. Next is Kiss of Death, and I talked about this one as well. I feel like for this one, it just fell flat for me. It was just kind of blah. It wasn't bad. It wasn't super disappointing. It wasn't, anger inducing, nothing like that. It wasn't, it didn't bring out any strong emotions. And I think that was the problem for me with this one. I just was like, meh, it's fine, it exists, but I didn't have strong, this sucked, this was disappointing emotions, and I also didn't have strong, I loved this was good emotions. It was just kind of middle of the road and on the lower side of middle of the road. And it was also kind of sort of a mixture between a couple fairy tale retellings, so you also sort of know what's going on the whole time. I do want to continue this series, oddly enough, because I think she could write the next couple of books in a way that makes it more intriguing with the world and with opening up the world a little bit, and it not just being a kind of a fairy tale retelling or reimagining. So I am going to give the other 2 books a shot, but this one just didn't work for me. And it's, like I said, it's on here because it was kind of, I didn't have any sort of strong feelings about it, but it wasn't bad. I just didn't care. But I'm hoping that that changes. I've heard book 2, there's some more stuff going on, so maybe I'll get more invested. But it did make it on this list because of the rating I gave it. And last is also in that little Amazon Christmas series, All by My Elf. Like I've said with several of these actually, which is an interesting pattern. This one, as a short story, had a little bit more plot than Merry Ever After, but this was also just very, very focused on the spice and very focused on the romance. And not the building of the romance, just the spice, like just the hooking up. And that's not what I want in stories. So I didn't love that, and they're just kind of trapped and then they hook up and that's it. Sorry if that's a big spoiler. But they're just little cute. I was reading a lot of like cute Christmassy Hallmark type books in December, and I was really having a fun time with it because it was just so light and fluffy and fun. But this one kind of brought it down for me, and so did Merry Ever After. So didn't love this. I don't think you can say anything about the authors through these books because they're so short. It's hard to develop a really good story in a short story potentially, but this one didn't work for me. Didn't like it. Well, that's the end of the negativity, but these books just didn't work for me. I would love to know, actually, if you read any of these books and they really worked for you and why, or what your worst book of 2024 was. Overall, I think I actually had a really good reading year in 2024. I feel like some of it felt a little bit middle of the road in the more 3-star category, which is still really good. But I have to say, I think my worst books, comparatively with the year prior, it's better. So 2024 was a pretty good reading year. But for now, that is it for today's video. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.